Garcia's tuna on toast.
What's up, Stryker? How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for jumping on. How are you doing?
Doing good. Just finishing up summer, sending daughters off to Italy for a semester abroad, putting out albums, going to the beach, surfing. So a lot going on in my life. How about you?
Wrapping up summer, just like in my little bubble, plugging away, working, feeling lucky that somebody allows me to still do this kind of stuff that I like doing very much.
Right on. Yeah, I know. It's we've been doing it a while.
We have. And the first thing that I wanted to bring up was something you just brought up, and I feel comfortable asking because it's on your Instagram. The amount of support and love that you show for your daughters in words and in photos pulls at my heartstrings. And when one of your daughters just went to study abroad and you say goodbye, like what are those feelings like for you when she's off?
I try to pretend I'm a real tough guy, but when it comes to daughters and family, I'm such a softie. Like, I'm not sure if you saw Post Malone just put out a song about his young daughter. It's called Yours, and it's about how when his daughter eventually gets married, that her future husband may think that she's but he's still mine. And I'm sitting here listening to this Post Malone song, coming back from Home Depot, crying like a little baby.
Oh,
And, because I knew my youngest daughter's going off to Italy for a semester. I'm not going to see her for like 5 months. My oldest daughter is living in New York now and working there. And my middle daughter's in Brentwood working. And we're empty nesters. That's a weird thing. And to walk around the house and see all these empty bedrooms, it's a trip. So I'm adjusting, but that's what you do is you got to keep busy.
in one of the posts, and I read all your posts over the years, one that resonated with me, and this is not verbatim, but you're like, you've done so good as my daughter, and I was touring so much, and you still got straight A's in school, and you took the hardest of classes, and, everything that was in front of you, you basically conquered. Can you share anything about that, if that even hopefully makes sense? There is a question in there somewhere.
No, it makes total sense. And I always think about it as being like, kids usually rebel from what their parents are. And I was such like a wild man growing up and, got into lots of trouble. Always wanted to be the class clown. I got suspended twice and expelled once. I knew the inside of the principal's office better than the math class. And this was all before I met Fletcher. So he kind of took over the hijinks. But I think it was for them of seeing me and everything that I'm doing. They're like, I'm going to rebel by being a straight A student, and I eventually did end up graduating from UCLA. And I think if you could see, there's books all around this room. I'm really into books. I was an English major, so hopefully some of that rubbed off. They're all really into reading and they're all doing pretty well in against all odds, having me as their dad. My wife is very, very smart, and I think it all comes from her side. They're
Very
doing
humble
great.
of you to say you are a wizard genius when it comes to the way you write and the way you think. And we've talked many times over the years, and every single one of those opportunities I've had to sit down with you, whether we were on Loveline talking about sex, weird stuff, or backstage at a show, I always walk away going, he used 7 words and I don't know what they mean. I feel dumb right now.
I remember different times because I just got later on in life when I was going to school, I just really, through a really good teacher I went to El Camino City College first, and I had a great teacher there named James Antonelli. He grew up in Los Angeles, and the whole class, he would just tell stories about growing up in LA and what it was like back then, and walking from, back then you could take the bus and go downtown and go to all these great restaurants, and it was so vibrant down there. It's a little different now, as we all know, but just hearing all these stories. And then at the end, he would talk about English and writing and stuff like that. And I just finally took a real interest in it and started writing papers, and he taught us how to write a proper research paper. And then you kind of discovered like, hey, I can do this. And he really motivated me to apply myself. And he always was interested in what I was doing. And he said, you're a really good writer. You should continue with this. And no one had ever said that to me, and I think teachers today are so underpaid, and we really need to change that they can really make a profound effect on people's lives. And I know my daughters all felt the same way. They were all at different levels, but just having a really good professor in college or someone to really turn you on to learning, it's so important. And I try and put that into my music and just kind of put little flavors here and there of different ideas, and hopefully it translates.
I also think in the creative world, when you have a teacher or someone that you respect, it could be somebody in another band, maybe it's someone that works at a label, whatever, and they say, "You're pretty good." That is a confidence builder, at least for me in my small creative bubble. If someone happens to say, "Hey, you're not bad at this thing," I love hearing that kind of stuff.
Well, let me give you some more of it. You are a great
Uh,
conversationalist, and
yeah.
it's not easy. I do several podcasts and different interviews and stuff like that, and there's often times when the person just has nothing, and you're like, okay, where is this going? And we've talked a bunch of times, and the whole thing when it comes to music, it's like as everyone knows, there's different sides of it, and I really find it's really fun to listen to these podcasts now and hear you talking to different people. I watched your interview with Brett Gurewitz, who is basically, the main songwriter for Bad Religion, but basically he's the guy that gave us our career. I mean, on a silver platter to be on Epitaph Records at the time that we were, and to have that all happen, it just my life did a 180. I was working a suit and tie job
Mm.
at an advertising agency in Santa Monica, hoping to write, commercials for American Honda. And then at night I was going and going playing punk gigs and getting my nose broke
Oof.
and all this stuff going on. And then I hear different stories of people talking like, wow, I never knew that about Brett Gurewitz, or I never knew that about Tom from Blink 182, even though I've toured the world with the guy, you hear all this stuff, and it's just great to have that information. I bet it's cool for you to talk to all these people and find out new stuff.
It is unbelievably cool. And sometimes when I'm hearing stories, even what I've heard from you so far, I'm sitting here going, wow, these are more puzzle pieces to the whole puzzle that I never knew. And it's just, when you mentioned this professor that you had, and of course I knew you went to UCLA, but I didn't know about the junior college. And then talking about Brett Gurewitz, of course I know Brett was involved in your career, but the love that you just show for him and hearing the words behind what you can just read in a story from 20 years ago. Yeah, it is awesome to be part of this.
Yeah, I do have to say one thing though, and it's one thing that's always been bugging me. Another part of our career was really important was that Taylor Steele, the famous video director, put our music into his surf videos, which featured Kelly Slater and Rob Machado, all the best surfers. And that really revolutionized surfing and also the surf video world. And by this guy named Greg Browning, who's a professional surfer, but a local guy from around here, he gave Taylor Steele our cassette tape and said, if you're looking for music for your videos, you should put bands like Pennywise and Bad Religion and The Offspring and Blink 182. You should put all these songs in there. And Brett admits it. That is really the thing that kicked us off, because all of a sudden, this little band from Hermosa Beach had fans in Australia and the south of France and in the north of Spain, wherever there were surfers and skaters. And that was so important. But Brett keeps thinking that it's Kelly Slater that put the videos in
He
there.
said that on
And
my podcast, right?
yeah, that was
Yeah.
on your podcast. And
Right.
I wanted to just, because I know the purists out there,
Yeah.
Brett is doing so much stuff. He can't be expected to have every detail, but I know the surfing purists out there, and especially I want them all to get the credit that's due them. And it really was Greg Browning giving it to Taylor Steele, and then Kelly Slater being a surfer in the videos, and obviously the 11-time world champion. But those little things that when you hear and you're watching stuff, you're like, oh, wait, you got it almost right. You got to get it perfectly right. And surfing has been such a big part of my life. I just went to Kelly Slater's surf ranch and surfed with a bunch of music industry guys, Rick DeVoe, who managed Blink for
Yep.
years,
Yep.
and a bunch of guys had a great time. So still surfing a lot, and hearing those guys' stories, athletes and skateboarders. I talk with Tony Alva all the time and Steve Caballero, and
Legend,
it's
legends right there. Wow.
Yeah, and it's that whole community of people in the action sports and Warped Tour world, that whole thing, it all just came together at the right time.
I have questions about Warp Tour. I have questions about Brett Gurewitz, but I want to ask you about Miracosta High School. Was your plan always music? You did mention you had a suit and tie job, but in the back of your mind, were you always thinking, I'm going to be in a very successful band that's going to go for 30 plus years?
No, I knew that I wasn't going to win the Triple Crown of surfing with my particular skills. And I played baseball and other sports growing up, Little League and all that. But I knew I wasn't going to distinguish myself in any other way. So I got a guitar, started playing, huge into all kinds of music growing up. And when the punk scene was happening in the early 80s and starting to blow up locally with Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Descendants, all going to Maricosta High School, so all in my backyard. At the same time, you had MTV was blowing up. The first bands were showing up on there, and Blondie and the Clash were on there. So it was all kind of integrated. So I was the typical trendy asshole. I liked every kind of music. I loved The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen and Billy Idol as much as I liked Black Flag and Descendants. So I was playing in all these cover bands that we would play cover songs by The Clash and the Plimsouls,
Oh,
but then
yes.
also we'd be playing like I Melt With You, and all these
Modern
other
English. Yeah.
songs. So I was so confused of who I wanted to be. And I found out early on that the punk shows was a good opportunity to get your ass kicked. And I decided that I liked bands like X and stuff like that. The shows were a little more tame, but it was a trip. I mean, speaking of Maricosta High School, to see Bill Stevenson of the Descendants, walking in the high schools as you, Henry Rollins is at your local 7-Eleven getting coffee. It was a trip. Keith Morris lives a couple blocks from your house. And that's weird, I've always said it's like living in Liverpool and having the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Beatles, go to the same supermarket as you. It's a trip, and it makes you think, well, anyone can do this then. I just got to get a guitar and start writing some songs. So that's what we did. And then I ran into this 6'4" local guy named Fletcher, and he said, you should try out for our band. We need a singer. And I just, did what he said.
And okay, hold on a minute here. Hold on. When you mention the variety of bands that you like, the one thing that they all have in common for sure is they all know how to write a song, whether it's somebody that likes punk music or leaning top 40 or new wave, verse, chorus, verse. When it comes to your songwriting, was it a specific genre that inspired you, or more of like what was happening in politics in your brain? Was it certain songwriters?
It's funny. I've literally sitting right next to me. I'm going to show you. I have
Okay.
props. I've
Yes.
got this many tapes. Those are all cassette tapes. I have 2 boxes like that because
Whoa.
I'm going through them now and I'm looking back at all these songs that I wrote, years and years ago and on my little 4-track. And at first I was just trying to write what I heard on the radio or MTV or what was going on. I think the first song I wrote was called Living on the Edge. I don't know what it was. I have some little tapes of them somewhere. I was in a little cover band called Joe Nobody, but I think it was just, you're just trying to emulate your heroes. And then in college, I got really turned on to a lot of more political thought with the Transcendentalists and Emerson and Thoreau and all that. And then when Bad Religion Suffer came out, that just like blew everything out of the water. And because it was so inspirational and it was just like, to me, I had already been listening to Black Flag and Descendants and absolutely loved that music. The Jealous Again EP of Black Flag and Milo Goes to College are like, and Group Sex by Circle Jerks, that's just my Dead Sea Scrolls. That's the Bible of punk rock. And then Suffer came along and it just had this attitude, and the songs were so hooky and, like you said, so catchy. That's the thing about melodic punk rock. Some of the bands might not like that name,
Right.
but having a song like Jealous Again or Beverly Hills Century City, that's melodic punk rock. There's a hook that you can sing. And
Yes.
so having those bands be your influence and then Bad Religion coming along, it just completely changed my writing style, and I became very political. And Jason, our original bass player songwriter, he was really into PMA and wanting to change the world and make the world a better place. So we just got on that horse and kept riding it all the way up till today.
Jason Matthew Thirsk,
Yep.
PMA, positive mental attitude, correct?
Yep. It's tough because I think for all the wildness that was going on in the 80s and 90s, there was real political things that were going on with the Cold War and then the Iraq War, and then, so much stuff going on in the world. There was a time where it was easy to become negative and be really concerned with the fate of the planet. And there was a lot of that nihilism going on in punk rock. You saw that everywhere. It was kind of more of a response to how crazy the system and the establishment had trapped us all into this narrative of the way the world had to be that we were just kind of rebelling against. But at the same time, you can't be angry all the time. There's a lot of in Eastern thought, and not to drop a big name, but Nietzsche talks about loving your fate, and no matter what it is, of like even the good things are great, obviously, but even when something bad happens to you, it's an opportunity to learn from it. And I think that's where PMA comes from, of like looking at everything of like, instead of I read something recently that was said, instead of saying this happened to me, it's like I get to experience this,
Right. Right. Yep. I definitely know of that right there. Or saying something like, I have to work tomorrow at 6 p.m. because I have to interview 2 bands for an hour. No, I get to work tomorrow and I get to hang out with Jim Lindberg on the internet right now. This is like a highlight for me. Is that the right thinking?
Exactly. That's exactly what PMA is. You nailed it. And, there was other bands. I would say probably the first band I heard that was into that was Bad Brains. And Bad Brains, and then Minor Threat. And, it just, that struck a chord in me because I was a messed up little kid and always kind of felt like I was the weird one and kind of overcompensated for that. And I think that's what drew me to punk rock, is it felt like this was a place for the weirdos and the outcasts. And then kind of later on, it became the popular place to be. But still at that time, I think I developed this attitude of like, if I'm going to be the weird one in class, and I'm just going to embrace it and be happy about it. Like, this is who I am, and I'm going to, run with it. And it's kind of that attitude in everything in life of like, you have to, instead of getting so down with everything and always accentuating the negative, which, hey, I do it too. There's times when I can play sheet karate in bed thinking of all the things that have not gone my way, but you have to let it go at some point and find some way to move on and process it. I mean, I sound like I should be on the therapist couch right now, but it is really true.
Yeah, I believe it. I think it was 91 where the full length Pennywise debut album came out. Can you just please take me a few years before, and how did you and the guys end up on anybody's radar? Like, where were these shows at? Who came up to you and said something? How did the word of Pennywise spread?
It happened so fast. We did, like I said, Fletcher said, come over to the shed and try out. We started playing some songs. I learned the set list in a couple weeks. We had a party in someone's backyard and 200 people showed up. Fights broke out. People were making out in the bushes. It was like mayhem. Like, I'd played parties before then, but it was always the typical, when you're in a cover band, everyone kind of stands back and looks at you and they're afraid to get into it. Typical LA crowd. Everyone's like, show me what you got, And this was just, it was like Animal House, it was like, it went into chaos. And then word of mouth, every successive party we played after that got bigger and more crazy. And then it got to the point where police were showing up after the first song. It was just because they knew it was just going to be mayhem. And this is all over about, 3 or 4 months. This isn't a lot of time. It just happened really fast. And then it was a guy named Vernon Trujillo at KXLU, the local college station. He heard about us from someone, and then we went and did his show. He asked us to come on his show, just like you did. And he said, hey, you guys are really good. I should give this to Brett Gurewitz, because we told him how much we loved Brett and Suffer. And then it was that fast. Fletcher had to go up a couple times. I didn't learn this till recently. Fletcher keeps us on a need to know basis, but he said that he actually, the first time he went up there, Brett said, "Hey, this is great, you guys, but it's not really for me." And then, so we went back and we had some other songs that we'd been working on. We recorded those on a little old boombox, and he went up a second time and basically said, "Listen to this, you're signing us." Right now. And Brett agreed. Thankfully, Brett agreed with him that the songs we'd progressed, and that was it. It happened so fast after that, it just kind of one thing after another.
And did you have any goals? I mean, you're a very, very smart guy. You're someone that I don't think just thinks about what's happening in this 10 seconds, but what's going to happen the next 10 years potentially. Was there a band meeting or in your own head, like, this is what I'd like to do within a year, 2 years, 5 years?
Well, it was interesting because right at that time, the band did pretty well. I remember when this guy, Fat Mike from NoFX, told me that we had sold 12,000 records, and that was really, really good. And I had no idea what is good and what's not. And I was like, oh, great. And then the next time I went up to Epitaph offices, this guy, Brian Dexter from The Offspring, was sitting in Brett's desk, putting albums into sleeves and stuff and hanging out. And, it was just kind of one of those things where, oh yeah, I've heard that Offspring album. Those guys are really, really good. I remember just going like, wow, they are really good. And then that just happened so fast, but I was still working. I was working in different jobs. When I was in college, I was a janitor, like Noodles from The Offspring. I was a janitor at aerospace buildings and top secret security places. And then I was working my job, and I had kind of been bouncing around, but the band was getting more and more popular. And, I was like, well, job, tour of Europe. Always wanted to be a musician, and this thing is kind of going, but I have a sales report due on Monday, and the thing is, you know what? I went to my dad, and he was always really supportive. First thing, he wanted me to get an education because he never got one and always felt very passed over in his sales job. And, but once I got that, he was more than helpful in realizing my music goals as well. He bought me my first guitar. He bought me a PA when I wanted to try out for a band, and a microphone to go and try that. I'd never sang before, and he was always really supportive. And I went to him and I said, Dad, I'm thinking about quitting my job and going to Europe on tour. And he said, Jim, these opportunities don't come forever, and I think you'll feel bad if you pass it up. You're always going to have a job, but if you want to try this, I support it. And that, the rest is history. And that he was a huge support to me at a crucial time, and here we are today. The advice seemed to be good.
It was definitely good. Is your dad still with us today?
Yeah, my dad passed away a few years back, about 4 years now.
Sorry.
I put out an acoustic album called Songs from the Elkhorn Trail, and there's a song on there that's about that situation. He passed from Alzheimer's, which is a really tough one to go through because they kind of lose their identity. But there was sparks of him that would come out, and he was always a real flirt. He was in an Alzheimer's care facility, and all the nurses said, your dad just said, I like to see you come over, but I like seeing you walk away better.
Oh.
And I was just like, Dad, you need to slow down in the memory care place. You can't be flirting with all the nurses out there. But yeah, that time it was tough to make a decision on what I wanted to do and how it was going to play out. But I think everyone in every band has different times where things are going really good and it seems like it's easy, and other times it's more difficult.
I'm going to ping pong around a little bit. You showed me the box of cassettes that you had. kudos for keeping all of your stuff. Because a lot of times, at least for me, early in my career, I would record stuff. I don't need this thing. I've thrown away more stuff, and you've kept it. Has it always been by your side, or was it in a storage locker? Where do you keep all your
I
things?
just recently grabbed these out of the attic, and I
Okay.
have two full boxes. The other one's
Hmm.
over there. I've got boxes of books. I keep everything. I'm not a hoarder, but my attic is pretty stocked full of stuff. And yeah, I keep all of it. And I bet you there's some gold in some of these tapes down here. I know for sure that I got a copy of Smash by Offspring where he didn't have lyrics yet. He was just kind of going, yeah, 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 stuff like
Wow.
that.
Oh
So
my
if I
gosh.
can find that, that's going to be worth some money someday. It's probably down in this box right here, but I have all kinds of every song that I've written for any band. I have a demo of it somewhere. I think there was a time a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
someone came up with this thing like, we're going to take all your old songs,
Right.
make an NFT out of it, and we're going to sell them all for billions of dollars. Well, I'm still waiting for that
I
cash cow
think
to come in,
everybody
but
is. Right. You got,
you got to hold on to that stuff, Striker. You can't be giving away your gold to, the garbage man.
I know you're exactly right. I think my potential number one piece of gold was 1995. I was working on an AM station in Tucson, Arizona, and this band that I heard of for the very first time that day called No Doubt came by, and I said, "Hey, is there any way you can just sing a song while on this show?" They're like, "Yeah, we'll sing two songs." So I do have that tape somewhere in a box in a storage locker, and that could be fun to listen to someday.
Yeah, you got to go through all that. We had Gwen Stefani play at the Beachside Festival. I'm part of this Beachside
Oh
Festival
yeah.
down here,
Yep.
and she just crushed it. Like everyone was so stoked. I think it was our biggest selling day that we've ever had, and she just owned it, and no doubt played Coachella. And I've always said it's like some of these bands, they get better with age. They're actually sounding better than ever. And I know that probably early in our career we were a little wild and loose, but now a lot of these bands are really tightening up. Even NoFX is sounding better than ever at all these punk and drublic shows. We would be notoriously loose back in the day, but I think everyone's taking it really serious now and want to put on a good show. And no doubt that whole era with No Doubt and Sublime and when all that was going on, I mean, you were right at the thick
Yep.
of it. It
Yep.
was crazy to think that this little scene of that really was punk rock, it was those bands were all in that whole Warped Tour scene, and No Doubt and Sublime were on the very first inaugural Warped Tour thing of that birthed so much creativity, and Kevin Lyman really put on, I mean, he was a crazy man. He worked us hard, but at the same time, that was a lot of entertainment for how many years?
So you've done, I believe, because I looked this up since you mentioned Warp Tour, you guys did 10 and only four bands did more than 10 Warp Tours. You necessarily weren't rookies in the business when Warp Tour started. Was it an easy decision to say yes to Warp Tour and be part of this like a traveling musical circus, knowing what the circumstances would be? The live shows would be so fun, the crowds would be great, but maybe the way you were living would not be the most comfortable.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. We had just done Australia with Blink, and they were just the first. I don't even know if the first album had come out. I think it had, but we were playing a lot of like extreme sports shows. We had gone up to Alaska with them and Unwritten Law, and we were doing all kinds of like these sports event shows. And I think the X Games might have first been starting up, and that was just all part of our culture. We all skated and surfed. This wasn't just something we glommed onto. This was our life. So I said to Rick DeVoe, I said, we should do a tour with us and Blink and Bad Religion and Rancid, and all these bands are doing really good. And we kind of joked about it, but we were calling it the gym tour because it was my idea.
Right.
And so he's the one that said, hey, Kevin Lyman is doing this thing called the Warp Tour, and they had it. They've done it 1 year, and it was based off of Warp magazine, which was a magazine that was around back then. And then we got together, and he said, "Let's meet at Billabong headquarters with Bob Hurley, and I think Paul Gomez might have been there.
Oh yes.
But just all these guys from the surf industry and Kevin Lyman and Kevin said, "This is a great idea. Why don't you guys I'll just pay you guys to come on the Warped Tour if if I keep doing this." And then like that's how stupid the meeting was. It was like, okay, well, I guess that works too. So, and then it was,
Wow.
how many
Yes.
years of this year, and then we take a year off and then do it the next year and then take a day off. And during that time, we had so many experiences that were so crazy of just like watching all these cool bands from the stage and then just go back to your bus and, maybe have a drink with some friends and then the barbecues later at night. And then, you wake up and do it the next town and just wake up at 10 a.m. and try and find a porta potty that isn't so foul that you're gonna retch when you go in there, and you're just living, from place to place. And then you're in Orlando, Florida, and you're watching, Blink play on some weird shed stage, and then you're watching Rocket from the Crypt play on the back of a truck, and the only lights we had was literally our lighting rig was two Home Depot lights on either side, that if it got too late,
Yeah.
they'd have to turn on the Home Depot little lights, you know, and and we'd be playing Toronto and there'd be a tornado and it was just wheels off. And I think that was kind of what made it so fun, is that it wasn't like this big tour where everyone's like really, have to do everything by the book. We were doing it by the seat of our pants. And oftentimes the roadies would be like, the crew working the stage, they would like give a shit. Like you had to be on stage on time or else we're going to be pissed at you. And no, we're not going to let your friend up on stage. And there's too many people on stage already. And it was like summer camp. There was no rock stars at all. I think there was a thing back, a documentary that talked about that. It's like, there's going to be no rock star attitudes on the Warped Tour. And there was bands that were blowing up. I mean, perfect example was Sugar Ray. Like they had the number one song on the radio with I Just Want to Fly, and they were still playing the little side stage down in the
Right.
dirt.
I remember that, and I know that Mark McGrath was here telling that story. So
Oh, really?
Kevin Lyman was on as well. Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
they've all told that story.
It's
We're all
great.
telling the same stories now.
Oh,
We're
I
like a
love
bunch
it.
of
Same
old.
old story. There you go. Pennywise song too. Here we go.
True.
Wait, Jim. Also, what I felt as a somewhat of an outsider when it came to the Warp Tour was there's a community not only watching the bands play, we're all in this together, but it felt like that every band that was part of the Warp Tour also felt that way. And so it just felt totally cohesive for everybody involved, people watching and the bands that were playing.
Exactly. And the other cool part about that was I got to meet all these bands that, some bands I idolize and were like, oh man, this band is great. And then some bands I'd never heard about. A couple bands I didn't like at all. And then I got to know the guys in the band and I'm like, you guys are my new favorite band. It was that way with so many bands and just meeting different people. Like the first time we went out, I remember just being in awe of what we somehow created, of like, now all of a sudden there's, you know, 10,000 people in Baltimore and there's, this many people coming out in different places of like, wow, this thing really has legs, it's really going to be something that everyone's going to respond to. But it never changed its vibe of it being something for the people, that there wasn't this big separation between audience and the bands on stage and the guys working the merch tent, and the people in catering. Like there was no one above anyone. No one walked through that place thinking that they owned it, and when people did act that way, they got slapped down really quickly. And I think it was a good lesson for a lot of people to be humble about it. And it was just super fun, and I heard there's rumors, but I'm not going to say anything.
Okay. All right. That's a good nugget right there. This is
Hmm.
a two-part question. Who were some bands that ended up being your mentors, and who are some bands that you saw on Warp Tour that you thought were good And years later, they became huge.
Oh, there's so many. It's crazy. Obviously, we were right there for the big guys, which are Green Day, Offspring, and Blink. But you know that there was one band, Rocket from the Crypt, who I just really, really loved. Like they were just so different, and I loved them from the start. And to get to see them play every day was just such a treat. And then you had bands like Limp Bizkit. Like I had never heard of these guys, and it was like all of a sudden, like they were the it band, like in the course of the tour. Of like as the tour is going on, people are starting to talk about it because they stood out. I'm sure Kevin and the different people from Warped Tour you've had on your show have talked about. There was bands like Eminem came on, and he was huge. He was the biggest rapper in the world, and the fans weren't receptive to him, and because they felt like as much as they probably loved Eminem and were like bumping his tapes in their car, but it was like, no, this is our scene. Don't bring this in there. But then there was a little band called the Black Eyed Peas who played the tour, who everyone embraced and was just like, you guys are our favorite, and gym class heroes.
Hmm.
I'm also forgetting one girl named Katy Perry,
Oh,
who
that's right. Katy Perry was on Warped Tour.
who was playing on the Warped Tour while she had a song just blowing up, I Kissed a Girl.
Yeah.
And that was a trip, because you'd see them during the course of the tour, all of a sudden they're a household name, and that's pretty crazy to watch happen. And I think for the rest of us, like us and all these bands, we were just happy to be playing somewhere, and not playing some stanky ass club, downtown. It was you're playing outside, and they got a half pipe, and guys are skating, and they got a motorcycle jump, and guys are doing backflips in the air. It was fun. It's not the same as playing in a little club, and so that made it different.
Have you been able to appreciate, and the rest of your band appreciate, how important you are today and how important you've been over all these years to so many different people in terms of not only creating memories, but like different music scenes and starting in this position? And then as a result of great songs and the live shows, it's like, do. And like, you're a band that really worked for it and did it and were very important. You guys appreciate that? Can you appreciate it?
Yeah, I think I always go back to Jason, our bass player, and I kind of feel like that's our legacy of what he started. And he really gave us the motivation to try and write meaningful music. And, you know, I think, that to me became very important that we kind of have a reputation on both sides. We write these important songs that are meant to be inspiring, and songs like Bro Hymn that have given people comfort when they lose a loved one, everywhere. Bro Hymn is now played in football stadiums, and
That's right.
and to have that, that's great. We also have this idea that we're this crazy party band, and Fletcher's, throwing up on your fellow DJs and diving into drum sets and biting people's hindquarters and all kinds of things. That's what we're known for from some people. And there's times when I'm like, Jesus, do we have to continue having this thing? And who's going to take us seriously? But at the same time, I think it's all part of the whole package that the band has brought. Is like we're a real band from Hermosa Beach, California. Hermosa Beach and this area down here has always been a really fertile breeding ground for the counterculture. The Hells Angels were started down here. You had Quentin Tarantino had his video shop.
That's
Literally, I could walk there in 5 minutes. Tracy Lords was from Redondo Beach.
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yes.
there's been so much countercultural weirdness coming out of here, and this little strange southern bay of Los Angeles, that we were just this band that, was just trying to join in the craziness, and I distinctly remember, I've said this many times before, that day when Fletcher asked me to come and join the band. I'd been neighbors and good friends with Jason my whole life, but I didn't know Fletcher that much. And I showed up to this little clapboard single room garage, and it had graffiti all over it. I still have the picture of it. It had skulls and graffiti, and it was beaten down, and I could hear them in there playing. And I knew that this would be, if I went in there, this would be the rest of my life. I knew it, you know. And I sat there for a long time and was like, do I want to do this? Because I knew that if I got in there with Jason, who is such a great guy, and Fletcher's this local legend already, that we were going to have a recipe that was going to do something. I don't know what it was going to do, but I kind of had this foreshadowing of it. And for better, for worse, and everything that we are and everything that we've accomplished, or the things, you know, that we've done, I think it's kind of like having that cohesion of all the things that we're about, you know, surfing, skating, the whole action sports world, the Warped Tour, Brohim being played in stadiums, and songs with a message, and Fletcher doing his crazy stuff. It's all part of it. It's
Absolutely.
you have to love it all. Like I was saying before, you have to just accept that that's what we are and what we do, and keep doing it.
When About Time came out, your third full length, and it was your first one that charted. I don't know if that was a big deal to you guys, but I remember being so happy for you. I'm like, oh my God, look at Pennywise in the Billboard Hot 100. And you worked with Jerry Finn, the late, great Jerry Finn. Was there ever anything happening within the four of you about resisting the success or being embarrassed by it?
You know, we were lucky enough growing up where we did in the South Bay. We have a friend group that was more than happy to take us down a notch and call us rock stars, and you guys suck. And, you know, I liked your first album better. And so they kept us very, very humble.
Okay.
I had my one of my best friends, I'd give him the new album. Oh, listen to this. Nah, it's too preachy. I don't like that, you know. And so I always went out saying like, fuck, my best friend says our new album sucks. I guess here it is, you know. It was never a thing that we were just, well, at least for me personally, of thinking that we were you know, the best thing since sliced bread. It was more of us just going like, hey, let's try and write the best songs we can. Jason obviously really put us on that path of writing these really melodic, catchy, positive songs that were a lot of them, especially with About Time, there were a lot to do with certain friends falling into drug abuse and addiction and trying to snap people out of it. So there was realness to it. There wasn't, and these were specific people that we were talking to. They were good friends of the band that maybe gotten on heroin or meth or different drugs like that. And there's a lot of personal things going on in there. Like a song, like you said, Same Old Story was a song that I wrote about my dad, and imagining different scenarios, like people having parents, you know, holding them back, and different things like that. And I also wrote the song Perfect People, that was about my experience when I went to school and I rushed a fraternity and they turned me down, and me saying like, well, I didn't want to be a part of your damn fraternity anyways, you know. And kind of like that whole thing of kind of being an outsider from all the perfect people out there living and growing up in Hollywood and all these places, and seeing all the plastic people out there, which is basically just the Circle Jerk song. But it was a weird time. It was a lot of stuff went into it. It was something that happened.
When you guys made Full Circle in 1997, your friend and your bandmate Jason was not with you to make those songs. What was your confidence level going in? What was your inspiration of wanting to do it or not wanting to continue?
You know, it was a real thing. We were out on the Warped Tour. Jason had left the band to deal with his addiction problems. And I had talked to him right before he had rejoined the band after going into a facility. And he had never sounded happier. You know, he's like, wow, I talked to these doctors and they said, if I keep going on this path, drinking the amount that I'm drinking, I'm not going to live much longer. Like, it was that bad. And I'm just so glad that I finally am getting the help that I need. And I was like so happy for him, and was just like in a status of where I was checking in with him and making sure. he joined another band around here and then was playing with them. We were out on the Warped Tour, but I always expected him to come back. I was just like, I can't wait till Jason comes back. We can move Randy over to second guitar because Randy's a great guitar player, and then everything would be great. And you never can tell what happens in people's lives. And when that happened, I definitely have always felt that it was an accident, that Jason in his right mind and completely sober never would have done that. And it was a result of him getting a lot of drugs and alcohol given to him at a terrible, vulnerable time. And so when we went back out on the tour, I felt terrible. I just felt crushed, and I didn't know if I wanted to do it anymore. And it really was the love of the people in the crowd of being so caring and embracing us physically and figuratively, of like we got you guys, we know you're going through a hard thing, and just having that family, the Warped Tour family, really. I remember we went back and we played New Jersey, and yeah, it was heavy, and that really kept us going. And then writing Full Circle, that album, it was really therapeutic to write songs that I wrote. Like there's a song called Did You Really? That was one where I was trying to just fight through that idea that I know Jason really didn't want to die, that he wrote and from the words that he would write. That's a lyric from the song. I knew that very much. He was a very positive guy, but he got trapped by a demon, which is alcohol addiction. And it was tough. And there were definitely more times after that where I still wasn't sure I could keep going on with everything going on in the band. And obviously, I left for a while back in 2008, and those were hard decisions, but I just had to do what felt right, at every time that, I had to go with my feelings on what was right for the band and what was right for me. And it'll always be the central thing in my life that I'll always regret, that I didn't pick up that phone call when I wanted to. I was literally on the way to the hotel to call Jason the night that we got the word, and those regrets are hard to live with. It's something that when it comes to mental health issues and addiction, that is really, really hard to process. And I think it's something that'll always be with us. And once again, it's something that defines the band of songs like Every Single Day, and different songs that try and inspire people to get through the hardest of times. And that was one for us that was very tragic.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. When you left the band in 2009, we're going to segue here to the Black Pacific. You put out a full length, I think it was a full length in 2010, and now there's new music from the Black Pacific. In 2010, what was your, I don't know, you just wanted to make other music with some other guys while you took a break?
It was a lot of things. I felt the band definitely needed a break. We hadn't taken a break since we started. We were album tour, album tour, album tour.
Crazy, man. 91, 93, 95, 97, 99,
Yeah.
2001. You guys were so prolific. Sorry to interrupt, but people need to know how, sure, they're living the life in this band, but how difficult it is to keep up a schedule like that. And a label or the band, we need 10 more songs, 12 more songs. And guess what? We got to go tour for 150 days. And guess what? Right when we're done, we're going to go make 10 to 13 more songs that have to be as good as the last batch of songs. That's tough, man.
It's super tough, and it's taxing on you. And then you throw in alcohol and partying and stuff like that. And we had just done a big tour that was a lot of partying. And the guys wanted to go right on to the next one when we got home. And I was like, hey, guys, that last one was too much. Like, we need to slow down. Everyone needs to take a break. And I really need to take a break. And they were like, we want to go to Brazil. So make your decision. And that to me was, just kind of the start of me saying, well, hey, if we're going to do this, and they asked me point blank what I would do. And I said, hey, I'll probably put out my own record. And then I don't imagine that's going to light the world on fire, but it's something I've always wanted to do, because when you're making a record, especially with Pennywise, it's like trying to paint a picture with four dudes and a producer. Like everyone thinks something should be different. Everyone says, my song is great, your song sucks. And we had no problem screaming at each other. And you can imagine having Fletcher screaming at you, what that's like. And big knockdown, drag out fights in the studio. And I just wasn't ready to do that again. And it's like, I'm not ready to go on the next tour of Brazil and that craziness of South America. And I'm not ready to do another record with, if it's going to be like it was last time where we fought like cats and dogs. And so going to the Black Pacific, I had met this guy, Alan Vega, who was playing with Good Guides in Black, Rick Thorne's band, and we just hit it off on tour. We just gravitated towards each other and started talking a lot and hanging out on tour. And I said, hey, man, I got some songs we should get together. We started writing on songs, and it was one of those things with Alan. He knows exactly what I want. Like he hears me playing guitar, and all of a sudden he just lays it down. And on that album, there's a song on the first album called Time Is Not the Reason. And I think it's a perfect example of me and Alan firing on all cylinders, because he just came up with these really cool drum parts. And I played all the guitars on the whole album. And there's a line in that song that says, I control my destiny. And I really felt like that was me making a statement of like, I can do this on my own. I don't need anyone's help to write a song. I can play guitar on it, and I'm going to take control for once, and instead of going in the studio and having everyone want to change what I had written, I want these songs to come out exactly as I want them. And now fast forward to 2024, I went through, or last year, I went through all these tapes, and I knew I had some songs in there over the years that had gotten cast off or that I had worked on with Alan. And I was like, these are some good songs. Like, why didn't I ever produce these? And so I just went to the guys and over kind of said, hey, I want to work on these songs, but if we're going to work on them, I want to do them my way. And if you guys don't want to do it, then that's fine. I'm just going to put them out myself. And it was that simple of a thing of, some guys in the band were like, great, I want to do it. Other people are like, I'm not going to want to do it that way.
Right.
I'm going to want to have some say in how these songs are done. So I'm like, no harm, no foul. I'm going to put out this record. And once again, just like the first Black Pacific release, I worked on all the songs with Alan in the past. And so I had to call it the Black Pacific again because it's me and Alan's gig. And I'm really happy with it. I think kind of like the first album, when you hear the first song, it's called I Think I'm Paranoid.
I think I'm paranoid. I was just about to get to it. Go on. Tell me about I Think I'm Paranoid. Go.
That's one I wrote a long time ago. And it was after kind of 9/11 and the Iraq War, and during all that time, about 2004, where, come on, after 9/11, people were like, is the world ending? This Iraq war is dragging on, and we're seeing all this stuff to be paranoid. We're hearing about climate change and all this stuff. And I had just written this catchy little song about it. And I dusted that one off last year and was like, man, think of all the things you can add to this song now since 2004.
Right.
And I added in militias and Antifa and global pandemics, and there's even more stuff to be paranoid about, and just kind of updated that song. And then I said, Alan, you want to go in and record these? We went in with Paul Miner, who's a great producer and has his own studio, and it was so easy. I mean, it's just when the difference of a Pennywise album, it's like giving birth and like a UFC match, cage match at the same time, whereas recording Black Pacific is like on a desert island, just peace and tranquility. And it was just a fun process the whole time. And I really get to address a lot of things on this record. There's a song about AI. People probably go like, oh, geez, please don't anyone write a song about AI. It's the last thing we need. But, it's something that's on my mind. I talk to my daughters about it all the time, of saying like, you guys better get in some jobs that don't require that AI is not going to be able to take over. And And so I wrote this song about it. I wrote some songs about, finally wrote a couple love songs that aren't your typical love songs, but they're about like me and my wife wanting to escape somewhere where there's no phones.
What's the name of the one of the love songs about your wife? You're escaping?
Uh, it's a song called Float Away.
Float away.
And that's the line of that I want to build us a raft where we can float away where there's to some island where there's no phones or things like that. And there's another song called I Won't Let You Down. That's another one that's kind of, like we started out the interview, we're empty nesters now, and it's kind of like us sitting there looking at the sunset going like, wow, we made it through it all somehow. And now let's just sit here watching for that flash of green. And we have been through a lot, man. It's been a while. A lot has gone on, and we've raised three daughters and done a lot of tours and stuff like that. And it seems like it goes by in a blink of an eye, but it's really fun for me to put out new albums. I think people really, really like the Black Pacific album, and I'm hoping there's another Pennywise album in us at some point, or at least a single or something that we can put out there. And I think the guys are ready to get in there and do it. We just have to have a mediator of some kind. You want to do it? Maybe Stryker, you should come down and referee.
You know what? I know you're kidding, but if you did ever need something like that, I would be right down the middle and be very calm. And I'd be happy to help with any of that if it leads to something positive for the band.
Okay, you're hired. I officially hire you.
And I work for free, FYI.
Great, even better.
Anyway, song. Wait, so the Black Pacific, how many total songs?
11 songs. A lot of the first half, the first 5 songs are really paranoid. There's the song Paranoid, but then it's a lot there's a song called No Fun that it's about maniacal dictator leaders around the world, not just in this country, but all over the world. You're seeing these sociopath leaders, and the line in the song is, "It's no fun until you kill everyone." Like, let's be honest, they're being selective of what they want to do, but it really feels like they get so crazy, power hungry. They just want to blow us all away in so many different forms. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the different war zones around the world, it's barbaric, it's diabolical, really, of what's happening. And there's a song called Won't Make a Sound that's like about the eventual apocalypse that we're all expecting and hoping doesn't happen, will probably hit us in our sleep. It'll come without a sound. It'll be a silent revolution. And so the first side of the album is really about what's going on, all the things to be worried about in the world. And the second half is kind of like, okay, you can escape from that. And maybe I'm talking to myself a lot. I don't know if you are, but I'm a news junkie. Like, by the time I've had my second cup of coffee, I've read 2 newspapers. I've gone on every news site. I have to know what's going on with everything in the world, from pop culture all the way down to climate change, all the way to global wars, and it's a lot. Sometimes you got to just put that phone down and escape it. And I'm trying to do that, of go on a news diet somewhat, except for the Stryker show. I'm going to watch that religiously.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate
but
that.
You know what I mean? There's a lot out there.
And there is so much out there that you could read 3 stories in a row on a subject and, at least for me, be swayed a little bit. But 2 minutes later, there's 3 more stories with the opposite side. I'm like, oh, look at this right here. I mean, anything you want to find out there, you can find that'll somehow make your brain feel a certain way if you're looking for it.
And that's a good way to put it. My wife just sent some, because we're always, our daughters probably can't stand us, but we're always sending stuff like that, of trying to, get off social media too much. But one of my daughter works in social media, so it's unavoidable at this point. We all do it. But she sent an article about it does mess with your endorphins a little bit, of that pleasure thing. It is kind of like the old Pavlov's experiment of hitting that buzzer to get the treat, like,
exactly.
Oh,
right.
maybe I get to see Britney Spears dancing in a weird bikini. Okay, that would be fun. Let's hit that really quick before I go to bed.
Right. Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
needed?
Right.
You
Or
know,
you know what? I'm going to put up a post on my own page and I'm going to hit refresh every 7 goddamn seconds so I can see how many likes I'm getting. But you know what would make me feel just as good if I walked on a treadmill for 30 minutes. But it's like, I mean, there's so many ways to find it and some of it in an unhealthy way, right? Right. Especially as you said, with being on social media.
and here's the yin and yang of that. It's exactly what you're doing is I love watching a podcast where I get some real information and something that makes your life better. I was just listening to a podcast with Jason of Strung Out, and I've played more shows with Jason of Strung Out than probably any band out there. And so much that I didn't know about him, and it was so cool to hear that. And it's like, hey man, why do we always just like, hey, how's it going? Family good, everything's great. How come you never told me about this thing? Because I guess no one just divulges all their deepest, darkest secrets. It's they got to come on a podcast to do it. But
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think in that way, these are great. And then also for me, like concrete example, I just read a book by Sebastian Junger called In My Time of Dying. I recommend it so highly to everyone out there. Sebastian Junger, he wrote The Perfect Storm, which was that
George Clooney
movie about
movie.
the fishermen in the Atlantic who got caught in a storm. They all died.
Yep.
But he's an investigative war journalist. He's been in more wars than most soldiers reporting on foreign wars. And he had a near-death experience. And it is such a good book. And then I listened to a podcast that he basically recites the whole story of his near-death experience. And his dad was a physicist, and he talks about the science of near-death experiences and how he was brought to life by the doctors, by them inserting a catheter in his groin, and he explains how that catheter was invented by this one crazy doctor who did it to himself. And like just in that podcast, you learn so much cool stuff about the medical industry, about religion, and about how physics and the universe and religion and Buddhism and karma and reincarnation and these are all heavy things. This isn't light reading. This isn't a summer beach read. This affects your life and how you look at the world and the universe. And so there are really cool things about the internet that you can find some really good information. It's just really sad to me that you have all this disinformation along with it that sends people down these really bad rabbit holes that's training us to go such a wrong way. It's our responsibility as humanity to separate those two. I don't know how we do it, but it has to be done.
100% agree. My goal with this dumb show that I do, I pretend I have these buckets in front of me, and I always want to fill up these buckets with, is it entertaining? Hopefully. Is there incredible information? Yes. Some of it you may have heard, but it's coming directly from someone. And is it like, I don't take myself too seriously, but can be a serious conversation when we need to do it. And if I can fill those buckets, that's my goal for this thing. And I think hopefully that we did that today, me and you together.
We did. Can I ask you a question? Who is your favorite interview besides me, of course?
Well, Jim Lindberg, number one. My favorite interview. Oh, what are you doing to me? Okay.
I know.
I'm going to go with Tom DeLonge and Brett Gurewitz.
Really? All right.
Tom, Brett Gurewitz's stories, that was music education 101. He, like you, is super smart, almost underappreciated with intelligence, and has been sticking to his guns with the vision that he's wanted to stick to for so long. And it's just very inspiring. And then Tom DeLonge is this guy who can talk everything from UFOs to songwriting to growing up locally to knowing the history of music with just an infectious energy. And I feed off people with infectious energy and great stories.
That's another good comparison because we all know Tom and how goofy he is. He was so funny on every tour. And like the first time I met him, he was always giving me shit and with his little perverse humor that he likes to do all the time, him and Mark. of like being like so fun and so funny and so immature. And we would mess with them. Fletcher would mess with them times 1,000 and, you know, shocking them with electrical outlets and, everything that he does. And it was so crazy and funny. And then there's the UFO side, which what could be more uh, important to the universe and humanity that if we ever discover there's another species somewhere, whether they're under the water or they're flying up in the air, of that at the same time that he's this goofy guy, he's also doing this incredible work that's, I would always joke about it. And now I'm the leader of the Tom Was Right campaign. I want to start a website that Tom was right all along.
That's
And
exactly
I'm
right.
sure that's what makes it fun for you to talk to all of us knuckleheads and see that we have a fun side and then there's a side that's very, very serious about things we're talking about.
Okay, the Black Pacific. Of course, I'm playing I Think I'm Paranoid on my show on 40 different stations. Jim Lindberg, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Stryker. Always fun talking to you. Got to see you at the next show and when you're going to be the referee / moderator for the next Pennywise album.
Mediator, moderator, referee, keeping everybody calm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
And free.
Congratulations. And free. That's right.
Hope you enjoyed. Now hit that subscribe button. And for more Tuna on Toast, listen wherever you get your podcasts.